Hello everyone, welcome back to Bee's Creations. My name is Beatrice. Today's video is part 2 of my 3-part video series on how to take body measurement, read and understand sewing patterns. In part 2 today, I will be going over the sewing pattern layout. I hope you guys would enjoy this video, and if you do, please don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. In today's video, I'm going to cover the information that you have inside of your pattern. You have your pattern paper where they give you all the information that you need. I'm going to use a piece of fabric, and I'm also gonna be using an actual pattern to show you the layout or to place your pattern on your fabric. Okay, now we're gonna start with talking about your pattern layout. But before I go to that, I just want to start with this key guide that they give you in your pattern, because you need to understand this first in order for you to understand how to place your pattern pieces on your fabric. So let's start with this one first. Right side of pattern, and there's a clear image there. The right side of the pattern piece will be facing you. Now this here, when you're looking at the picture of the pattern on your layout, if you see it's looking like that with those dots, it means that the wrong side of the pattern is facing you. You see that shade image like this on your layout, it's the right side of the fabric that's facing you. And when you see a clear image again, it looks the same as the pattern. It's the wrong side of the fabric. A clear image here means wrong side of the fabric. Okay, next what we're gonna go over is the pattern pieces. Let's say that I'm making view A, the dress. You will have here the number of pieces that you need to cut to make view A. Let's go here to C. It will be a different one. They will give you another list of pattern pieces that you need to cut for view C there. And then right here, they give you a diagram of what the pattern pieces should look like. It's really easy to go like that and check pattern pieces number 1. That way you get a clear image to see, okay, this is what pattern pieces number 1 should look like. What I usually do, if I'm doing dress A right now, I go here and circle everything that I need for this particular garment that I'm making. Okay, now let's go here. This is how the layout should look like. It's gonna be the same for whichever pattern that you're using. There's gonna be multiple layouts there in this piece of paper. Okay, so first notice this 45-inch on some of them and the 60 inches. So what that means is the width of your fabric. If the width of your fabric is 45-inch, you're gonna make sure that whichever layout you're choosing for this view, you have to make sure it falls under 45-inch. If the width of your fabric is 60-inch, stick to that part right there and look for your correct size. Okay, because if it's 60-inch here and you see there's different sizes, let's say my fabric is 60-inch and I know my size falls under 6 to 16, so I will make sure that I stick to that layout right there, not this one, because this one it says 18 to 22. So since I know my size is up there, so I will stick to that one only. Always looking at your size to know exactly which layout you're cutting. Let's take a look at this first layout there. Let's say that my size is 6 to 16 there, and I know this view is view A. As you can see, it's not only one layout they give you for this, because there are more pattern pieces that you need to cut out. So you have 2 of them here. View A, you need 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, and 16. So let's take a look at the first one. Your fabric is folded in half. This is the folded edge of the fabric. Remember, this is the selvage of your fabric. This is the folded edge. And the side here is the raw edge of your fabric. So your fabric is folded. This layout here, you have the right side of the pattern piece facing you. For pattern piece number 11, 4, this one is 16. But take a look at here. So with that one, the right side of the pattern facing down. So you're looking at the wrong side of the pattern. For 8, and 9. If you look at this layout right there, all the pattern pieces are facing right side up, and the fabric is folded in half, right side together. The wrong side of the fabric is facing you. And another example of layout right there, fabric is right side facing you, so everything here, it says selvage it, so you won't see any fold. Just lay your fabric and then you place your pattern on top of it. When it's like that, you're gonna place it on the right side. Now let's move to a more complex layout right there. Here you have the folded edge again, but this time the fabric is not folded all the way, just to fit those pieces there. So you have pattern piece number 7 and 12. They place them on the fold. Usually when you see this like that, that's what it means. And you have the selvage, because right now you're looking at the right side of your fabric. You're gonna cut one of each of these pieces. You have 2 pieces for 6. It's not that you have 2 number 6 on your pattern envelope, it's only 1 number 6. The first time you're gonna cut it with the right side of the pattern facing you, and then you're gonna turn the pattern over with the right side facing down to cut another piece, but it's the same piece of pattern that you're cutting twice. Let's go over now some of the symbols on your pattern. When you see this here, anytime you see that symbol here, this piece of pattern, you're gonna place it on the fold. Now what you do, you place your pattern piece, follow those 2 arrows, and then you place them on the fold of the fabric. Right now I have my fabric folded in half. I place this side here exactly on the fold. You cut on the side here, and there you cut around it, but this is gonna stay on the fold. Now let's take a look at this symbol right there. When you see that 1 arrow like that, place on straight grain of fabric, keeping line parallel to selvage or fold. I have my the same piece of fabric back here again. This is the folded edge of the fabric. Down here is the selvage side of the fabric, the raw edges of the fabric. This is the arrow that you're gonna follow, right? They want you to place the pattern. You're gonna make sure that arrow point here is parallel the folded edge of the fabric or the selvage of the fabric. It could be either way. So we have a folded edge here. I'm gonna place this parallel. One way you can check that to make sure that you have it right is to grab a ruler or your tape measurement to make sure that I have it straight. What I will do is to take that ruler here, make sure I have a straight line here. This is parallel to the folded edge right there. When you're placing your pattern, you might have to place multiple pieces at once. You don't want to place them whichever kind of way. You want to follow the layout, make sure every single piece are placed the right way. Now let's take a look at some other symbols that you will find on your pattern layout. When you see this star here, it says here, cut piece only once. Every time you see a piece of pattern that has that star there next to it, this piece is a piece that you're going to cut only once. You're not gonna cut it in a double thickness. You're gonna cut it on a single layer of fabric. If we take a look at this one here, only a part of the fabric is folded. It's not all the way folded in half. So now this is why you have this in a single layer. So now for this piece of pattern, because you see that star next to it, pattern piece number 5, so you're gonna cut it in one single layer. Now let's take a look at this sign here. Right here, they're showing you what they want you to do. I'm just gonna show it with a piece of fabric. From the beginning, we have our fabric folded. This is the raw edge there, right? This is the selvage, and you have the folded edge up there. But you're gonna make sure that your fabric is placing right side together. This is the right side of my fabric. I took the raw edge there. Okay, this is the raw edge. Now you're gonna have, this is such a small piece of fabric, so we have the 2 raw edges meeting up right there, selvage here and selvage up there. This is the new folded line. You're going to cut this first. You're gonna cut the folded edge of your fabric, and then now you're gonna have 2 pieces of this fabric. and then you're gonna be using the, because it's a double thickness, so you're gonna place the pattern pieces now on those two pieces of fabric. This is where it shows you there. You cut the folded edge right there, you left with two pieces of the fabric, and as you can see here, it's right side together. You're gonna place your pattern here. You see how they tell you right here double thickness. This is the sign for it. And you see here selvages and selvages. You have two pieces of fabric. This is after you cut your fabric, and then you're gonna place the pattern piece like that on it. It's always with nap layout. Usually you will see that next to your pattern sizes and the width of your fabric. You will see with nap, and sometimes it will say with nap or without nap. Most of the time they give you a layout for both with nap or without nap. Nap layout is for fabric that has some kind of texture. An example of one would be velvet fabric or some type of animal print fabric. You want to place it with nap, that way everything goes in the same direction. When you cut your fabric, you don't mess up the design. And without nap is any type of solid cotton fabric, they will put it as without nap because you don't have to worry about anything for this. We basically covered a lot of the symbols already. I showed you the grain line already, that's done. This one was the folded, place on the fold, that's what we did first. And then this sign here is the buttonhole. Every time you see this sign on your pattern, that's where you're gonna make your buttonhole for your garment. And when you see that cross there, that X, so this is where you put your button. On your pattern piece, you're gonna see that sign, and you know where, when you place it on your fabric, you need to transfer the markings there. That way you get it transferred to your fabric. These are the notches on your pattern piece. All right, this is what they look like. This is the notches. This one have one single notch, but you have some with two notches. So make sure you transfer every single notches that are there, that are on your pattern piece. Transfer everything into your fabric. This one is small circle, big circle. Okay, this one is a square and a triangle. Don't ignore them because you need every single circles that they put there. Let's see for this piece of pattern here. You see how I have a big circle and a small one. Let's say for size 14 here. When you look at them, there's a bunch of circles. You just have to look for your size. Don't just go mark every single circles in there. You'll get confused. You only mark the one that's next to your size. I'm size 14 here. I will transfer this big circle to my fabric and the small one next to it. It's very important that you do, because later on when you sew in your fabric, when the direction calls for you to match the big circle, match the small circle together, you have to have them there so you know, okay, I'm sewing it right. The same for your notches. You want to make sure that you transfer them all. When you have to match them, they match. So every time you see that diagram, you know you're gonna have the final measurement size next to it. It could be your bust line, waistline, hip line, your bicep for the sleeves. You will always have that inside your pattern. Sometimes if you don't find the final measurement on the back of the envelope, when you look at your tissue paper, you will find it. Oh, just like this one here. Yeah, right there. Okay, when you look at your tissue paper, you will find it there. You see, this one is for the waistline. This measurement you can trust because this is the final measurement. This measurement already have your wearing ease and seam allowances. So for size 14 here, it's 31 inch. So now you know, if you're cutting size 14, if your waistline is 32 inch, you know here cutting size 14 will not work for your waistline, because this is the final measurement. You want to make sure whatever the measurement that's there, it will be okay for your size in order for your garment to turn out okay. Every time you see that double lines, you know that's where you shorten or lengthen your garment. Here they give you the description on how to do so. It's gonna look like this. This is a small piece of pattern, but it has everything. You have that double lines, it's always gonna look like this. Okay, let's say if I want to make this shorter, cut it in the middle here, you cut this line. Or if you're shortening, sometimes you don't even have to cut you can just go like this, and then you'll just fold it. You just fold it, then you will have the shorter length. Let's say you want it longer, so you will cut this. Okay, now you'll have two pieces, so you will place a piece of tissue paper underneath that one. You measure from this top, from this piece there, you measure if it's 1 inch or 2 inch, whichever down. Okay, and then once you get to your measurement, you place the second piece underneath here. So now the middle part is where you're gonna have the, the length. You don't want to cut your fabric any kind of way. You have to make sure you always follow this double line. That way you cut it the right way. All right, now let's go over the next page, which is the sewing information. We already went over this earlier with the pattern. This key guide right here, this one has more information. This the interfacing and your lining, the shade image here that we went over earlier. This is the right side of your fabric always. Okay, so now one side of your fabric will always be clear like that, or a white image. And then when you get those dots, this is your interfacing when you're sewing. So for the interfacing, this is what it's gonna look like when they talking about your interfacing. You're gonna see this like that. Another shaded image again, but this time if you look, there's some kind of line crossing over. This one will be the right side of your lining. It looks the same as your fabric, but the only difference is those lines. So make sure you pay close attention to that. When you see that layout on your pattern piece, make sure you look at it closely, so you know that right now they're talking about the lining. And this one as well is the same thing. One side of the lining, the same thing as the one side of the fabric. The only difference is those lines you're gonna see across. So look out for that. When you see it looking like that, you know this is the lining that they're talking about. And then here you have the seam allowances. You always stitch with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance unless otherwise indicated. You will always hear me saying 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Yes, every time I'm sewing two pieces together, it will always be 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. But in your pattern information, sometimes if they want you to sew something with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, they will tell you these two pieces, you're gonna sew them at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And then this one here is when they tell you to trim. So you do that especially for corners. When you stitch two pieces together, you want to trim them so your garment will lay flat. When you iron your garment, everything will lay flat. That's why you trim. Always trim. Usually when you trim up to 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Especially for corners and curve, they will tell you to clip the inner corner. When they say clip the inner corner, so that's how you do it. The pattern information will tell you exactly what they want you to do with the seam allowance. And then you have this pin and fit. Always pin your fabric before you stitch. I always do that. I use a lot of pins when I'm stitching. You want to pin your fabric together, that way you'll stitch the right pieces together. A stitch is when you're using the longest stitch length of your sewing machine and with no tension. That's the basting stitch. That way when you're done, when you want to pull it out, it will be very easy to just pull it out. So you base stitch something so you could put it together, and then you have to go over it and stitch it again with that 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And press. When I'm sewing, I don't show when I iron my stuff, but I always iron my garment when I'm sewing. As you're sewing, you have to have your iron next to you to press your fabric as you go. And here in this part, that's the last part of it. All the definitions of the different stitch you should know when you're sewing something. Pattern information, if they tell you to double stitch, so if you're not sure about what to do, you come here and read it, and then it's clear. It's really clear definition of what a double stitch is. But if you're still not sure how to do it, there are plenty of YouTube videos out there that will help you with that, because that's how I started. How to edge stitch, you'll find something for that. You gather stitch, you read it, it's clear definition. Sometimes even with reading it, you could be able to do it without even seeing a video on it. Narrow hem, same thing. Okay, reinforce, slip stitch, top stitch. So you want to get familiar with all these terms, that way when you see them in your pattern information, you know exactly what to do. And then we are ready to stitch. So I will see you guys next week for part 3, where I will be sewing this beautiful top. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you on my next video.